Welcome to a journey into the shadows of history. Today, we'll be exploring the chilling and sinister world of medieval torture devices, tools designed to punish, control, and break the human spirit. Each device has a story tied to regions across Europe, where terror was often a tool of authority. From the stretching horror of the rack to the searing spikes of the Iron Maiden, prepare to learn about the grim methods that left lasting scars on human history. Our journey begins in England, home to one of the most infamous devices of medieval torture, the rack. This tool of terror first emerged during the reign of King Edward I in the late 13th century, primarily as a means of extracting confessions or information, but its use quickly spread across Europe. The rack was a simple but horrifying device, a large wooden frame with rollers at each end. The victim's wrists and ankles were tied to ropes attached to these rollers. As the torturer turned the handles, the ropes would pull tighter and tighter, slowly stretching the victim's body. As the tension increased, joints would dislocate, muscles would tear, and in the worst cases, bones would snap. The excruciating pain left many victims screaming for mercy, often confessing to crimes they hadn't even committed just to make the torture stop. The rack was favored by authorities not only in England but also across France and Spain, where it became a feared tool of law enforcement. Next, we travel to Germany, where we encounter the chilling legend of the Iron Maiden. The city of Nuremberg is most famously associated with this device, though its use during the medieval period remains debated today. The Iron Maiden was an iron cabinet, often designed to resemble a human figure. Inside it was lined with sharp spikes, but these spikes were not positioned to kill the victim outright. Instead, they were placed to avoid vital organs, piercing only the arms, legs, and torso. The door would close and the spikes would press into the body, causing unbearable pain without immediately causing death. In some cases, victims were left inside for hours or even days, slowly bleeding to death. Though the Iron Maiden is often thought of as a medieval device, historians believe it may have been used more in the Renaissance, solidifying Germany's dark legacy of torture. We now journey to Italy, a land rich with history but also home to some of the most notorious methods of torture, particularly during the Inquisition. One such device was the Judas Cradle, a gruesome method used to punish heretics and enemies of the church. The Judas Cradle was a pyramid-shaped seat. Victims were suspended by ropes and lowered onto the sharp tip of the pyramid, which would enter the anus or vagina. The victim's own body weight increased the agony as they were forced to sit on the sharp point. This torture could last for days. As the victim's body weakened, the pressure would cause severe pain and often lead to infection. The Judas Cradle was not designed to kill quickly, but rather to extend suffering for as long as possible. Used extensively during the Inquisition and became a symbol of the Church's brutal control over those it deemed heretics. Returning to England, we find another cruel invention from the reign of Henry VIII, the Scavenger's daughter. Unlike the rack, which stretched the body, this device worked by compressing it. The Scavenger's daughter was a metal A-frame. The victim was forced into a crouched position, their head and legs trapped by the device. As it was tightened, the body would be compressed, squeezing the chest and abdomen. The pressure caused severe internal bleeding, broken ribs, and extreme pain. Invented by Sir Leonard Skeffington, the lieutenant of the Tower of London, this device was used primarily on prisoners of the state, including political dissidents and traitors. Victims were often left in the device for hours, and the internal damage was often fatal. In France, a different kind of cruelty awaited blasphemers, witches, and adulterers: the Pear of Anguish. This small but deadly device was as brutal as it was deceptive. The Pear of Anguish was a metal device that could be inserted into the mouth, anus, or vagina depending on the crime. Once inside, a screw would be turned, causing the pear to expand. As the metal leaves opened up, they tore the victim's body apart from the inside, causing extreme internal damage. This torture was not always fatal, but it left the victim permanently mutilated. The Pear of Anguish was a preferred tool during the French Inquisition, though its use spread to other parts of Europe as well. Next, we move to France and Germany, where the breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, became a symbol of public execution. This device was not just about causing pain, it was about spectacle. The victim was tied to a large wooden wheel, arms and legs stretched wide. The executioner would then use a heavy iron bar to smash the victim's limbs. As the wheel was turned, each limb was systematically broken, often leaving the bones in splinters. After the limbs were shattered, they were woven through the spokes of the wheel, and the victim was left to die, often from shock, dehydration, or exposure. This gruesome form of execution was intended not only to punish the victim, but also to serve as a public deterrent, with crowds gathering to watch the slow and painful death. In Spain, during the time of the Spanish Inquisition, one of the most infamous devices was the Spanish donkey. Known for its brutal efficiency, this device was used to extract confessions or punish those accused of heresy. The Spanish donkey was a wedge-shaped board that victims were forced to straddle. With their hands bound, the victim's own body weight pressed them onto the sharp edge, causing intense pain. To make the torture even worse, weights were often tied to the victim's feet, pulling them down further onto the sharp edge. Over time, the victim's body would begin to split. This device was not always lethal but could cause irreversible damage, and many victims died from blood loss or infection. The Heretic's fork was a small metal device with two sharp prongs, one facing up towards the chin and the other facing down towards the chest. The fork was strapped tightly around the victim's neck, ensuring they couldn't move their head without stabbing themselves. The purpose of the Heretic's fork was not to kill, but to create constant excruciating discomfort. Any movement of the head caused the prongs to dig into the skin, forcing the victim to stay perfectly still. This device was used on individuals accused of heresy or blasphemy, ensuring that they remained silent, both literally and figuratively, throughout their interrogation. In many cases, victims were left in this torturous position for days. For women, the medieval era was especially brutal, and Germany was home to a device that specifically targeted women accused of crimes like adultery, heresy, or witchcraft: the breast ripper. The breast ripper was a metal claw, heated to red-hot temperatures before being clamped onto the victim's breast. The torturer would then pull the claws outward, tearing the flesh. The pain was unimaginable, and many victims died from blood loss or infection. Those who survived were left horribly mutilated. This gruesome method of punishment was designed to punish and shame women, reinforcing societal control over their bodies. The breast ripper became a particularly infamous tool during witch trials in Germany, where fear of witchcraft led to widespread persecution and brutal punishments. Lastly, we return to Germany and France, where the chair of torture became one of the most feared devices of the medieval period. Also known as the judgment chair, this terrifying device was used to prolong agony and extract confessions through extreme pain. The chair of torture was covered with hundreds of spikes. The victim was strapped tightly into the chair, ensuring that the spikes pierced their back, legs, arms, and buttocks. In some cases, spikes were even placed on the headrest, piercing the scalp. But that wasn't all. Sometimes the chair was heated from underneath, turning the already unbearable pain into an unimaginable nightmare. The heat would burn the skin, causing severe blisters and burns in addition to the wounds from the spikes. Victims often passed out from the pain, but were sometimes revived to prolong the suffering. The chair of torture was a slow, methodical form of torture, designed not only to extract confessions, but to break the will of the prisoner completely. From England to Spain, Germany to Italy, these medieval torture devices remind us of the cruelty that human beings are capable of. Each of these instruments was designed not just to punish, but to terrify, to turn suffering into a tool of control. As we look back on the dark corners of history, let us remember the lessons these grim inventions teach us. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like and subscribe for more explorations into history's most chilling and fascinating tales. See you in the next one.